is your homie, the one, the only, Eli ASMR. Today I will be reading you guys a book called The Mountain Is You. The Mountain Is You. The Mountain Is You. While under a blanket. So, let's get right into it. Chapter 1. The Mountain Is You. There is nothing holding you back in life more than yourself. If there is an ongoing gap between where you are and where you want to be, and your efforts to close it are consistently met with your own resisted pain and discomfort, self-sabotage is almost always at work. On the surface, self-sabotage seems massachusetts. It appears to be a product of self-hatred, low confidence, or lack of willpower. In reality, self-sabotage is simply the presence of an unconscious need that is being fulfilled by the self-sabotaging behavior. To overcome this, we must go through a process of deep psychological excavation. We must pinpoint the traumatic event, release unprocessed emotions, find healthier ways to meet our needs, reinvent our self-image, and develop principles such as emotional intelligence and resilience. It is no small task, and yet it is the work that all of us must do at one point or another. Self-sabotage is not always obvious at the onset. When Carl Jung was a child, he fell on the ground in school and was hit in the head. When he got hurt, he thought to himself, yes, maybe I won't have to go back to school now. Though he is known today for his insightful body of work, he actually didn't like school or fit in well with his peers. Shortly after his accident, Jung began experiencing sporadic and uncontrollable fainting spells. He unconsciously developed what he would call a neurosis and ultimately came to realize that all neurons are substitute for legitimate suffering. In Jung's case, he made an unconscious association between fainting and getting out of school. He came to believe that fainting spells were a manifestation of his unconscious desire to get out of class, where he felt uncomfortable and unhappy. Likewise, many people, their fears and attachments are very often just symptoms of deeper issues for which they do not have any better way to cope. Self-sabotage is a coping mechanism. Self-sabotage is what happens when we refuse to consciously meet our innermost needs, often because we do not believe we are capable of handling them. Sometimes we sabotage our relationship because what we really want is to find ourselves, though we are afraid to be alone. Sometimes we sabotage our professional success because what we really want is to create art, even if it will make us seem less ambitious by society. Sometimes we sabotage our healing journey by psychoanalyzing our feelings because doing so ensures we avoid actually experiencing them. Sometimes we sabotage our self-talk because we believe in ourselves. We'd feel free to get back out in the world and take risks that would leave us vulnerable. just that, a way to cope. It's not an answer. It's not a solution. And it does not ever truly solve the problem. We are nearly numbing our desires and giving ourselves a little taste of temporary relief. Self-sabotage comes from irrational fear. Sometimes our most sabotaging behavior are really the results of long-held and unexamined fears we have about the world and ourselves. Perhaps it is the idea that we are unintelligent, unattractive, or disliked. Perhaps it is the idea of losing a job, taking an elevator, or committing to a relationship. In other cases, it can be more abstract, such as concept of someone coming to get you, violating your boundaries, getting caught, or being wrongly accused. These beliefs become attachments over time. For most people, the abstract fear is really a representation of a legitimate fear, because it would be too scary to actually dwell on the fear. We project those feelings onto issue or circumstances that are less likely to occur. If the situation has an extremely low likelihood of becoming reality, it therefore becomes a safe thing to worry about, because subconsciously we already know it isn't going to happen. Therefore, we have an avenue to express our feelings without actually endangering ourselves. For example, if you are someone who is deeply afraid of being a passenger in a car, maybe your real fear is the loss of control, or the idea that someone or something else is controlling your life. Perhaps the fear of moving forward and the moving car is simply a representation of that. If you are aware of the real issue, you could begin working to resolve it, perhaps by identifying the ways you are giving up your power or being too passive. However, if you aren't aware of the real problem, you will continue to spend your time trying to convince yourself to not be triggered and anxious while riding in the car, and find that it only gets worse. If you try to fix the problem on the surface, you will always come up against a wall. This is because you are trying to rip off a band-aid before you have a strategy to heal the wound. Self-sabotage comes from unconscious negative associations. Self-sabotage is also one of the first signs that your inner narrative is outdated, limiting, or simply incorrect. Your life is defined not only by what you think about it, but also what you think of yourself. Your self-concept is an idea that you have spent your whole life building. It was created by piecing together inputs and influenced from those around you, what your parents believed, what your peers thought, what became self-evident through personal experience, and so on. Your self-image is difficult to adjust because your brain's confirmation bias works to affirm your pre-existing beliefs about yourself. When we self-sabotage, it is often because we have a negative association between achieving the goal we aspire to be and the kind of person who has or does that thing. If your issue is that you want to be financially stable and yet you keep running, you keep ruining every effort you make to get there, you have to say that all rich people are terrible. If you grew up with people who told you your entire life that people who have money are this way, guess what? You're going to be resist having your anxiety around the issue that you self-sabotaging is usually a reflection of your limiting belief. Maybe associate being healthy with being vulnerable because you had a parent who was perfectly healthy when they suddenly fell ill. Maybe you aren't writing your magnum opus because you don't really want to write. You just want to be seen as a successful because that will get you praise, which is typically what people revert to when they want acceptance but haven't gotten it. Maybe you keep eating the wrong foods because they soothe you, but you haven't stopped to ask what they had to keep soothing you from. Maybe you really aren't a pessimist but don't know how to connect with people in your life other than by complaining to them. In order to reconcile this, you have to begin to challenge these pre-existing ideas, then adapt new ones. You have to be able to recognize that not everybody with money is corrupt, not by a long shot. Even more importantly, given that there are people who use their money in selfish ways, it is even more important that good people with great intentions are fearless in pursuit of acquiring this essential tool to create more time, opportunities, and wellness for themselves and others. You have to recognize that being healthy makes you less vulnerable, not more, and that criticism comes with creating anything for the public that isn't a reason to not do it. You have to show yourself that there are many different ways to self-soothe that are more effective than unhealthy food choices, and there are better ways to connect with others than through negativity. Once you begin to really question and observe these pre-existing beliefs, you begin to see how warped and illogical they were all along, not to mention distinctly holding you back from your ultimate potential. Alright everybody, that's gonna be it for today. That was chapter 1 of The Mountain Is You. Such a great book. Really makes you open your eyes to see like what you are doing with yourself and how self-sabotage really affects your day-to-day life. But I hope I was able to calm you guys down at least. And yeah, I hope you guys liked the video. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys tomorrow.